As many people know, the first videos of mine that really did well on YouTube were all related to a series called Infamous, which is just a PlayStation series that has to do with superpowers, moral dilemmas, and learning how to deal with responsibility. And because I plan on revisiting that series sometime this year, I think it'll be both nostalgic and forward thinking, and also just fun to just make a tier list of all the characters. So let's just jump right into it. But starting off, I deliberately put this as Cole, which I think is pretty easily going to go S tier. They did separate Cole from Infamous 1 and Infamous 2 into two different characters. They did that with a few characters like Zeke down here as well, and John and the Beast. But I think it's actually, it makes sense. They're pretty distinct in the stories, so I think it makes sense to do that. But yeah, Cole from Infamous 1 I think is just an absolutely amazing character. He's not as developed as his counterpart in Infamous 2, but he still is really well written. I mean, he starts off as kind of just like a basic gritty character, but then throughout the game you see him learn how to deal with and manage responsibility, which is a major theme throughout all the games, but it starts in this one, and it starts with Cole. Overall, I just love his design. I love his voice actor, which is just something that stands out to me because they have two different voice actors, and I love the arc that he goes on. I love his character. He embodies the Infamous franchise for me just to a T. So I'm putting him at S tier easily. Betty is one of those characters that she does play a part in the story of Second Son, but she's also, I mean, it could also be another character. I mean, just any real sympathetic character I feel like could fill her role and fill her shoes. So while I guess I don't hate her character at all, I think I'm just going to put her C because I think she could be replaced by any sort of sympathetic character and it could have just the same effect. Both Zeke from Infamous 1 and Zeke from Infamous 2 are both going in S tier, but it's not for the reasons you might think. Some people might put him in S tier because he's just Cole's ride or die, and he's the absolute GOAT, and he's his right-hand man. But I specifically am putting him in S tier for the exact opposite reason, because he's not Cole's ride or die. He literally betrays him in the first game, and he spends the entire second game trying to make up for that. So he has his own motives, his own flaws, his own character, his own role in the team that I think all make him an S tier character, not necessarily just his vibe or the fact that he's Cole's right-hand man. But I really do think that makes him more important and more developed. Some people might disagree with me, but I'm going to put LaRoche in D tier, and that's because I don't think he's all that important to the story, and that might just be because my memory, and I might not remember him all that well, but in my mind, if this was just a pure story, he probably wouldn't be necessary, and the fact that he's in the game is just because it is a game, and he kind of just gives Cole things for more the player to do and less for, what's necessary for the story. Sasha, I think, also goes D tier, but for an entirely different reason. I'm putting her in D tier because while she is a pretty good character and she's pretty mysterious, she's not fully utilized. I really don't like how her story kind of just fizzles out. Her story does get wrapped up in the comics later on, but to me, that's just not enough. I think her story really needed development in the game itself. I think if this game got remade and it was more modern, she probably would. But overall, I think that just like Second Son, Infamous 1 really suffers from being an underbaked game just in general. So I think that she's probably a victim of that. So it's not her fault, but also she kind of gets the brunt of it. Now I did have to look up who this was, and this is Shane from First Light. So it's the expansion after Second Son. And I think overall, Shane is just a C tier character. He's not super memorable, but he's not a bad character. I really have nothing more to say. I don't remember First Light all that much. I'm going to put him in C tier. Moya, I think, is a pretty definitive C tier character because kind of like Sasha, her story just kind of fizzles out near the end of the game. So she could be B tier, but I think just because of that, C tier character. Her story does get wrapped up in the comics, I know, but I think I'm going to give the games more weight than the comics. So I'm going to give her C, and I think that's pretty fair. If I'm going to be completely honest, I do not remember who this is. So I'm going to put him in D tier. I know they're from First Light, and I know that she's like a hacker lady. There's no shot she's above C tier. So I'm just going to put her D tier. I don't even care what her name is. I think just that's probably where she just goes. So Alden to me is a B tier character. I think that his character alone, just Like, he embodies the second act of that game because he does play like a big role in that part of the game. But he's better than Sasha in kind of every way. So I think he deserves 2 tiers above Sasha because she is comes out of nowhere and fizzles out of the game. Alden, meanwhile, we get his like not full, but we get a pretty comprehensive backstory. He has really good motives. He has higher stakes than Sasha, and he has a more definitive end, even though it's not really a definitive ending. It's more definitive and it feels more impactful. So overall, I love Alden. I think he's just a pretty good character, and I'm going to put him B tier. Fetch is going to be our first solid A tier character. I think she could go in B if not for all the context First Light added to her story. But with all that context, I think she's solidified in A easily, and I think if you really like her character, she could easily go S, and I wouldn't have any disagreements. She has a really good character, really good motives, she struggles, she has her own whole entire backstory, just great character overall. Now, Quo and Nyx I put together for a deliberate reason, and that's because I basically have the exact same thing I want to say about both of them. My opinion about both of them is kind of just intertwined, just like their arcs are in the story. So both of them, I'm just going to immediately put in A tier, and I'll explain why. Basically, in my mind, Quo is just the embodiment of order, and Nyx is the embodiment of chaos. And some people might take that as Quo is good and Nyx is evil, but like the game implies, that's not necessarily true. Because while Quo does start off as just an overall good character and Nyx kind of is implied to be just the bad character, they both have their own individual arcs which lead them to opposite sides of the aisle. So Nyx ends up being the good character and Quo ends up being the bad character, I guess you could say. And what I love about that is it's not done like super deliberately. You don't feel like the story's forcing them to separate and forcing them to switch sides. You feel like they just did it purely because of circumstances, which to me I think is beautifully done, and it kind of cements the reason why I think when you talk about one, you kind of got to talk about the other, because to me they're both just two sides of the exact same coin, I guess you could call it. There is no character on this list that I think embodies B tier more than Hank. I think Hank is just solid B tier character. He's got good development. He plays a pretty important role in the story, but he's not like super developed, or he doesn't have some crazy insane twist. It's just a pretty reasonable twist and a pretty reasonable, character arc. So I'm just going to put him in B tier. Just good solid character. Cole from Infamous 2, easy S tier. Objectively, he is better than Cole from Infamous 1, but for me, because this is a tier list and it's, also subjective and also a little objective, I'm going to put him at the same level as Cole from Infamous 1, because nostalgia does play that big of a role in my rankings. But yeah, overall, I think Infamous 2 Cole is just a really incredible character. Even if you do the bad ending, which is kind of a thing that I feel like doesn't make a lot of sense in most of the other games, whereas this game, it makes complete sense. Good and bad ending, just everything about Infamous 2, I think is a step up from Infamous 1. I think easy S tier, not really much to say about it. John from Infamous 1, I think is kind of like, I don't know, these two kind of give me the same vibes as these two right here, where they both kind of play like two separate sides of the same story, and they intertwine and they kind of flip sides in a way. But I also think that John is a little bit better than Moya. I think he's noticeably better than Moya, not just because I think he has more stakes in his character and his arc and his whole story, but I also think that because he has a more definitive ending and he does sorta return in the next game, it's just a little bit better, whereas Moya, her story just ends in a comic. Kessler, no doubt in my mind, easily S tier. If you've watched my videos, you know that easily I think he's one of the greatest and most underrated villains in not just Infamous, but all of gaming. And I call him a villain, but the thing I actually like about him is that he's not really a villain. He's just an antagonist, because you could look at his character and think two opposite things, and both of those things would be right. You could have two people that one of them thinks he's a villain, he did horrible things, and another person that said, hey, I think he's a good guy because he did what he had to do to save the world, and both of them are completely right, And I think that is just absolutely beautifully done. And yeah, if you want to know more, I made a whole entire 30-minute video about him where I basically just gush about how much I love him. But yeah, easily S tier. And in fact, I'm going to put him over here because these are all technically the same person. So Eugene. What is there to say about Eugene other than the fact that he's a shit character? I don't like Eugene, and in fact, I'm just going to lay it on him because I'm not even afraid. There are no Eugene fans, so I'm not afraid of hurting anyone. If I'm taking his bad side into consideration, like the bad path of Second Son, easily F tier. Maybe even worse than that. I think he's absolutely insufferable. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to go off the good path of Second Son because it does just canonically make more sense, and put him in D tier. He's not a bad character, he's just annoying. Actually, no, I thought about it for just another second. F tier. I actually, you know what? He is worse than these three characters. I don't like Eugene, and I'm going to solidify that in this video. Now, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have Reggie. Whereas Eugene is, I think, the most annoying character, Reggie is just the best character in Second Son. He's the most well-written, he has the best arc, and everyone is really, really sad when he dies. Every playthrough I've watched, all of them are really upset because Reggie is just the best character. Everyone loves him, regardless of the path you go on, but of course, it's more impactful when you go down the good path. So this is like my 20th time recording this, but I'm just going to put the Beast in S tier. Every time I talk about him, I talk way too long. So this time, I'm just going to say the Beast is an S tier antagonist. The moral dilemma he poses in this game is incredibly well done. It's just, yeah, I don't have to say any more. I keep rambling on for forever and ever. He's just a great antagonist. S tier, everyone knows that. The moral dilemma he poses is chef's kiss. Moving on. Trish is one of those characters that I think you could have a pretty wide-ranging opinion about. I think you could probably put her up as high as A, but also there might be some people who just don't really like her and put her as low as D. For me, I'm going to put her in B because she's a very important character to Cole, at least in the first game, but also I do really wish that in the second game she played more of a role where she's kind of forgotten about. But at the same time, I also kind of understand it because Cole's whole thing is that he's looking forward. He's not looking towards the past or what he's doing in the present. He's looking at the future. He needs to save the world, just do whatever he can at that very moment to save the future. So I get it, but also I don't really understand why the games kind of forgot about her. But for that reason, I'm going to put her in B tier. I wish she was a little more important so I could put her higher, but I think she just goes B tier pretty reasonably. Next up, we have Augustine. And for me, I'm going to put Augustine in A tier. And I do think that Infamous has some really, really good villains, and I do think Augustine is a good villain herself. I also think she's just missing one extra thing, just the extra sauce, just an extra little bite that makes her a great villain that would put her in S tier. I think she's a good villain, but maybe if she was given a little more backstory, or like maybe an extra twist to her character, or some sort of like extra stakes, like maybe she actually fulfills her goal at the end of the game, like something like that, I think would really add to her character a lot. Or I don't know, maybe if she had more of an impact on Delsin. But because she doesn't have that extra step to her character, I don't think I can put her as high as people like Kessler or as high as the Beast. But overall, I do like Augustine. I think she's a good villain. I just don't think she's as high as some of the others in the series, even though I think the series is defined by its incredible antagonists. Speaking of antagonists, we have Bertrand, and I think he definitively goes alongside Augustine in A tier. And I think he does that because he's just as developed as Augustine, even though he's a secondary antagonist, which to me kind of is the reason why Augustine only goes into A tier, because she's a primary antagonist and she just gets as much development as Bertrand does in Infamous 2, and he's secondary. So I think that both of them are really good villains, just, you know, they don't have that extra step that makes them incredibly good like Kessler or the Beast. Last but not least, we have Delsin, and this one is going to make a lot of people mad. Delsin, to me, is an F tier character. Just kidding. No, everyone wants me to put him there, right? That's what everyone thinks. They think I made Delsin the bad guy, so I should put him in F tier because I hate the guy. No, I think Delsin is just a B tier character. I think he's he's all right. I really think that Delsin, by being like his kind of only character trait is that he's super charming, to me makes him just not all that charming. So I don't know. To me, I think he just doesn't have enough development to go higher than B, because we know the backstory of people like Fetch. We even relatively know the backstory of people like Cole, Kessler, and stuff like that. But Delsin, we know just as much about Delsin's past as we do like Zeke's. It's pretty obscure, and maybe they were trying to dive into that more. Again, that's the whole development thing. The game wasn't as developed as it should have been. Maybe we were supposed to get more than that. But just taking it at face value, I don't think Delsin really reaches the heights of A or S tier. But yeah, if you are curious, I do plan on making more Infamous content sometime this year. I don't really know exactly when, but for right now, if you want to make your own, it's called this, Characters in the Infamous Franchise Tier List on tiermaker.com. And you can make your own, send it to the Infamous chat in the Discord, and I'll either react to them there, or if we get a bunch of them, I'll make a video about it. But other than that, I'll see you next week with another members only video.